You're not paying attention, Brent.
Oh, well, I didn't see your hand, actually.
Yeah. You
Hello,
said you were going to pay
everyone.
attention.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Canadians with Disabilities and Their Allies. My name is Brent Frain. I'm the host, and the show is also known as PWD Allies Podcast. Check it out on your favorite app where you find it best suited. Today, I have Karla Verschoor. If I pronounce your name right, Karla?
It's Verschoor.
Verschoor. I almost got that. I was like, Verschoor. I didn't want to say your name wrong, your last name.
It's a tricky one. It's a tricky one.
Yeah, it's such a great pleasure having you join us today. And Karla is actually from Inclusion BC. It's a great pleasure having you on. And the last time that I saw you was in front of the BC legislature under the big tent with a lot of other advocacy groups. Today, for everyone tuning in, today is season 2, episode 1. So this is a great pleasure having you join us today, Karla.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. So happy to be here.
Yeah. So yes, and thank you for coming on. So there's lots to dive into today. We're going to talk about the upcoming BC budget. Do you think that there's going to be anything in the BC budget that you foresee for people with disabilities in the province of British Columbia?
Oh boy, I hope so, Brent. I know what I'm going to be looking for in terms of the work that Inclusion BC does. Would it be helpful if I just kind of like share my wish list for the BC budget?
Sure.
Yes.
So we're a little bit of a different organization because Inclusion BC is a provincial advocacy federation. So we have members sprinkled throughout the province, and we also work across a lifespan. So from the twinkle years to the twilight years. So when we look at like the BC budget through a disability lens, we're looking for things in lots of different places. So some of the pain points that we see, and we would like some investment and some intentional investment with a targeted allocation to things, right? So definitely we talk about $10 a day childcare and inclusive childcare. But one of the things that we're seeing at Inclusion BC is that does not include all children. And that many children with disabilities are being kind of systemically excluded from childcare programs because there isn't targeted funding, both around the additional supports to be there, as well as the capacity of early childhood educators to support all children in their environment. So we're always looking for money there. And as you kind of follow the chronological age, Inclusion BC has an individual and family advocacy program that supports about 1,200 people per year. So 600 or over half of those callers are usually parents whose children that are in the K-12 system are being excluded from their neighborhood schools and classrooms. So we would really like to see some targeted investment in supporting inclusive education and building inclusive schools. As people graduate out of the K-12 system, then we get into more disability-related supports and the persons with disability benefits, which is, I think, where you and my interests and your interests really align, which is why we met outside of the provincial legislature. Like, we really, in a country as wealthy as Canada, in a province as wealthy as BC, it is an atrocity what our income support rates are at right now. So,
and do you think a disability disappears at 65?
Gosh, no. But But I think the reason why like people start talking, but there's, yeah, no, I'll just answer that question, Neil. No, I do not. But it's certainly one's life and quality of life would be a lot better when they turn 65 if the supports and services and income that they needed to live a healthy life were there, right? Like longevity and health and wellness of people would be significantly better when people hit 65 if they're supported throughout their life. So
absolutely.
It's kind of a weird phenomena, right? Because some supports kick in at your 65 that you probably could have needed when you were 45, right? But aren't available for you. So it's like neither one of those systems work particularly well. And they're both kind of run from a scarcity model. So it's hard to compare them because I don't really think either one are fully meeting people's needs from our experience as frontline advocates. But
well, especially when you have like the GIS and OAS and CPP for seniors, as we know, I mean, the GIS is extremely low. I think it's maximum in all total. I think it's like $1,800 a month to live on. And as we know, like the market rents right now are, well, I mean, depending on the community, but you're looking at no less than $2,000 a month. I mean, that's just for rent. I mean, then you got your hydro and your living expenses and your disability resources and needs that you have on top of all that. So you're probably looking at a ballpark figure just to maybe live comfortably for $5,000 a month.
Yeah, the number of seniors that are experiencing severe food insecurity, housing insecurity.
It's gone up.
Yeah, isolation and loneliness due to those factors. Like it's definitely, there's a pretty acute crisis there, and we see that in most social programs. It's showing up there in large numbers where there's huge strain. And particularly the community that I live in the Joyce Collingwood, one of the most significant issues of our community is food insecurity for seniors. It's a very real issue that it probably doesn't get the attention that it deserves.
There's a huge uptick right now on the food banks usage for sure, and the shelves are actually becoming very bare at food banks.
Yeah. The point.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I keep looking for a spot to. I was going to say, Brent, the point that you always make on the podcast, and I think it's a great one, is our social assistance is set up in a way that it's like it's pitting disabled against disabled, and it's like, well, you deserve a subsidized rent, but you deserve to pay market value, and and now we have, even like if you wanted to pit disabled against the elderly, you can do that now too, because you can say the elderly deserve a bus pass, but the disabled don't. And all this kind of like infighting between like who deserves what, but it's like you're actually pitting like disabled against disabled and disabled against elderly, and it's like you deserve this pile and you deserve this pile over here, and none of the two shall mix, and it's just like, are you crazy? It's just like, it's just nuts.
Go ahead, Brett. Sorry.
Yeah, it definitely is a good point on that, Neil, and thanks for bringing that up, because yes, I do talk a lot about that. It's the individuals that are in BC Housing, it's contracted out of BC Housing into other subsidized housing service providers. Sure, people, I mean, who doesn't want to have cheaper rent? I think this day and age where housing is, basically the critics call it a housing crisis. I call it a housing emergency, and it needs to be treated like a housing emergency because the rents are not going cheaper. People on disability assistance in the province of BC get maximum $500 for their shelter. Now, not all PWD got that $125 increase in the February 28th, 2023 budget. Now, the ones in subsidized housing did not get it, or if your rent did not go above that threshold above the 375, if you did not indicate that your rent didn't go up, which everyone's did in market housing. So most people did get that, but the ones in subsidized housing did not get that 125. Now their costs have gone up, extraordinary costs. I mean, sure, they get subsidized rent, and which is great. I think everyone should have an opportunity of having their income tested to 30% of their income, a rent guaranteed income. Now, but the cost of living has gone up for your disability related equipment, cost of food, any kind of resources, everything, as we all know, has gone up right through the roof. Now, I think that everybody should have received that 125 across the scale. And of course, there'd be arguments where people say, well, they're in subsidized housing. Why do they need 125 extra? Why wouldn't they? I mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's not a conversation that I think has a valid point. Like I
yeah,
don't think that anyone could make the argument that someone living on persons with disability benefits could not benefit and their quality of life would not benefit for
exactly.
an
Yeah.
additional increase. So it is a weird argument to make. And as much as we have, this is the first time in a long time that we've seen incremental increases. We need to acknowledge that there is still incredibly insignificant, and keep pushing at every level of government, both provincial and federally, for a meaningful income security program for people with disabilities, despite what type of disability they have, to your point.
Mhm.
But I just wanted to touch on what Neil was saying earlier,
Yeah.
because it's something that I often I struggle with the conversation, or the way that we frame the conversations, right? And we were talking about pitting seniors against people with disabilities, which happens all the time.
Oh, yeah.
But or people with disabilities against homeless populations, or people
Yeah.
experiencing housing insecurity. So we put the people in these categories
Mhm.
without the thoughtfulness or the acknowledgement that people cross over these categories.
Mhm.
Obviously, people with disabilities age and are represented in the seniors population, as are people with disabilities represented in the homelessness population. So when we define people using these narrow criteria,
Mhm.
I think we develop programs and services and initiatives that really don't meet the needs of the demographic more broadly. We're looking at individual characteristics such as age or disability or housing security in isolate as if they're isolated criteria,
Mhm.
which they're not, right? They're not. And that's always does a disservice to the conversation in my mind when we try to separate or put people in these categories so kind of systematically, because that's not the way life works. And it's definitely not the way lives unfold. So I always struggle with that conversation.
Yeah, me too. I think a lot about that on a day-to-day basis. I see people in the community that I talk to, and I just randomly, ask them like, how is the economy affecting your life on a day-to-day basis, and like food insecurity or rent. What would you like to see changed going forward? And most people I talk to tell me, I just want a safe place I can call home. I want to make sure I got enough proper food, that I don't have to be eating junk food or skipping meals, just so that I can go and pay a bill or pay my rent. And if I don't pay my rent, then I'm on the edge of now homelessness. And I said, well, yeah. I said, then what? Then you're going to qualify for BC housing, because you got to be homeless in order to, or on the verge of it. Yeah, there's like so many categories within that, but
So
you know, it,
everything's driving
yeah,
crisis to get the support you need rather than it
yeah.
being like proactively offered. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what
Yeah.
people tell me. They said if that was just offered to them, they could actually better their life in so many ways. And that's the kind of what's echoing across, I think, in a lot of areas of every province in Canada, really. And I'm glad that we're having this discussion, because it's so important that the message needs to get echoed out to the government of saying, okay, these are the issues that are outstanding, that we need to modernize our systems to better people's well-beings in the country. Yeah, you're right. I mean, there's a lot of like people that are homeless that they could be veterans. They've served in this country as for during the war, and now they're disabled. So now they're disabled veterans, or they're disabled citizens who couldn't afford a market rent. Now there's a long waiting list to get into a BC housing. I mean, that list keeps growing for years. I mean, last time I checked, it's like well over 10 years.
Yeah.
Growing.
So one question that I have for you, Brent, and I'm sure we both know that the BC budget's coming up in February.
Yeah.
One of my concerns, I'm just curious if you've had the same thoughts. Because we have the Canadian disability benefit kind of looming in the background, do you think that the provincial governments are kind of holding off on any meaningful investment for PWD benefits while they're waiting for the Canadian disability? That's one of my concerns. That is
Yes, actually, I do a lot of soul searching on that too, and really kind of crunching down the variables on it. And yeah, you're absolutely right. That is one of my fears, is that the provincial government is waiting on that. And I think it's the federal government had said, probably told them that, yeah, we're working on this, it's coming soon, and then they keep delaying it, delaying it. So now it's the opportunity of saying, oh, well, we don't have to put anything in the budget because the federal government's going to do this. And now it's not going to be until at least minimum, I heard, is that June 2025 is at the earliest.
This is going to deepen, right?
Yep.
People are going to go deeper into poverty and crisis while we have kind of that jurisdictional battle between the provinces and the federal government in terms of who's actually going to step up and meaningfully support people with disabilities and poverty. So yeah, I really do think that there's a role for Inclusion BC and folks like yourself to keep that pressure on provincially and be like, no, you have a responsibility here too. And our expectations expectations going into the 2024 budget is that we'll see a meaningful lift.
Yeah, and that's what I'm wanting to see too, is in the meantime, while they wait for the federal government to maybe do the Canada Disability Benefit, the actual financial part of it, I want to see the provincial government actually meaningfully increase the rates to a livable standard, and nothing less. I mean, nothing less than the poverty level. Like, it needs to be above the poverty, like nothing less. Nothing more, nothing less, but it needs to be at that, and plus tie it to inflation, so that, and then when the federal government does kick in, now they can actually work on that and top it up to even higher.
Yeah. I mean, I've been wrong before, but I have a hunch that the BC government won't claw it back. I guess it will depend on how they deliver it. Like, if it's like an income, because that's still being developed. If it's kind of like a income, like a EI type model, there's potential, but I think if they attach the Canadian disability benefit to existing benefit regimes here provincially, I would be really surprised to see the BC government claw it back. But I still think if I lived in a different province, if I lived in Ontario or Alberta, I might not be saying the same thing. But I am optimistic that the BC government will do the right thing and ensure as much money goes into people's pockets as possible. But where I'm not as confident is in that waiting period between when it's meaningfully resourced by the federal government and what happens to people in these next 2 years, right? Like that feels a bit more unknown.
There is a part of in the committee stage when developing the Canada Disability Benefit, there was an MP for the Federal Green Party, and we've had that MP actually on our show here, MP Mike Maurice. He's the member for Kitchener, Ontario, and he did manage to pass the part in the bill that actually did state, and he was really excited about it because there was a part where that it's agreement there that the provinces won't claw that back. So he was able to get that part in there where there's an agreement. Now, will the provinces comply with it? It basically did say that don't claw this back with the federal government tops it upon provincial. Now they just have to get all the provinces saying, yes, we agree with that. So that's kind of where that.
I've always thought too, is like, I can't, this is my stance on it. I can't think that the federal government would be on board with the idea of like, we're going to give you this top up, and it's like, go ahead, provinces, keep clawing back, it's fine, and we'll just top up whatever you're calling. I can't see them saying that's okay. Yeah. I can't see the federal government saying, oh, it's fine. You could claw back the stuff, and we'll just top up whatever you're clawing back. I can't see them. I can't see them agreeing to that somehow.
Yeah, and we used to receive a lot of assurance from Minister Qualtrough that wouldn't happen. But since the shuffle nationally, I don't know that we've had the new minister make strong statements. Certainly, we have our provincial NDP party speaking into it quite regularly, and as well as we were talking about earlier, is the emergency benefit speaking into the need for that. But I certainly haven't seen anything budgeted for that as when the economic statement that was released before the holiday break there.
I was talking to a friend of mine just before we launched the show, actually, and he was saying that he got it from a little birdie, so to speak. There's Megan Gilmore, who is a reporter for AMI. AMI TV. She has heard now, and I think we kind of all knew this, that of course the CDB, goes into effect officially it'll be June of 2024. That'll be the 1 year mark, right? Mm-hmm. But then from that point on, the government still has an extra year to actually implement it and like fund it. So according to her, and I think according to everybody now, she's thinking, well, it'll maybe be like June of 2025 then.
Or July or somewhere in the summer.
Well, I don't think they can push it much higher than that, but I mean, I will see.
The amount is still absolutely
the amount's still not
an unknown. I did watch one really disappointing clip, and you may have watched it too. And so I don't remember who asked the question, which journalist asked the question, but it was in response to the fall economic statement where, the $20 billion question came up, and it was kind of scoffed at by Mr. Freelander, just being like, yeah, $20 billion. We can only do so much. I can't remember the exact, but that was a really that was a very discouraging attitude towards the benefit, but also just, it wasn't a comment that instills much confidence that they will be funding at the level that we anticipated or hoped for. But, everyone has off days, and I'm just hoping she was having an off day and was put off by for some unrelated issue to disability, but that was a bit of a discouragement for me when I saw that, thinking, that does not instill much confidence in this government's willingness to fund this to the level that we're hoping that they fund it. But Inclusion BC is a member of Inclusion Canada, so as much as we work in allyship with our national partners, we do try to focus our efforts on provincial systems and provincial advocacy and provincial investment. So really wanting to keep our expectations high of the BC government in terms of what they're investing, and particularly as we see this increasing conversation about the missing middle when we're talking about our housing crisis. That always concerns me when we're developing responses or strategies that come straight down the middle of our population base, rather than thinking like in terms of inclusive design or planning to the margins, because we know usually where that leaves people with disabilities, right? Particularly those that are most marginalized by our systems, when our strategies are designed in nature to hit people in that missing middle and the middle income bracket. So really right now our conversations with the Ministry of Housing as well as Social Development Poverty Reduction is that conversation about plan for equity. Like I can't count the number of times I've said that or hashtag that, but I don't know how to get into that conversation that's so heavily endorsed by the working middle class, and obviously the need for housing security there as well. What implications that has for the margins? I was always like, plan for equity, think about everybody. Stronger BC for everyone. Is it for everyone? Like just pushing that question when we hear these blanket statements. But then we read the fine print and people with disabilities aren't there.
One thing that we could
left out, it's like
there's a list, and then it just stops short of people with disabilities.
Magically disappears.
One thing that we can maybe be a little bit confident in perhaps is a lot of government is throwing around the MBM, which is the market basket measure, right? And even when we had Sheila Malcolmson on, who is the minister for in BC here, the Minister of Social Development here, she has thrown around her as well. MBM is what they're targeting, right? So if we go by that, and we trust that Sheila Malcolmson as well is looking at the MBM measure, then the current measure is around $2,100 a month, roughly, maybe between 21 and 22, right? Probably we want to gear towards the lower, because we know the government's always going to go to the lower anyway. So let's say maybe worst case scenario is like $2,100 a month. So even if we go with that, already that's a good, because right now the disability amount now in the province is around $1,300 for a single, right? So going from 13 to 21, that's a pretty significant jump. I mean, that would be pretty transformative for a fair number of people, provided that they open it up, as you said, Karla, that they open it up to enough people, and they don't disqualify you, so that's a significant jump going from 13 to 21.
So I didn't see your show with Sheila, or Minister Malcolmson, but was the idea that is the direction they were going, is to bring persons with disability benefit rates up to market basket? Like, I have never heard that would be so exciting.
When they have the CDB, I think that's that's the conversations that she's been having behind the scenes with the federal government. Is the understanding is that the CDB would bring it up to the level of the top up of $2,100 a month.
And in the briefs that we've submitted in our conversations with members of Parliament, we've been pushing that to 2023 just to take into account the additional disability related costs, right?
Yeah, it should be more.
That's one that as an economic indicator, I don't think it fully that's one of the weaknesses of it, but
it is.
Goodness, 21 would be huge significant increase for people, and 23 would even be better, and index would even be better, and
there was lots of the discussions at the beginning when the CDB was launched, and a lot of people in the disability community across the country of organizations, we all kind of thought, well, hey, this is a provincial amount, now the federal is going to give this amount, so it's going to be that plus that, and people are like, wow, our rates will be like $28 over $3,000 a month. And then the federal government kind of quietly says, well, hang on, put the brakes on. Oh no, we're gonna combine these two. It can't be any more than maximum the MBM.
They're gonna go with a low number.
Yeah, exactly.
But it does sound that they are targeting the MBM. But they're going to go with the lowest MBM possible, though. That's going to be true.
It'll go up to the poverty level, though. At least that's going to be, it'll be up to that level.
It'll be the most significant increase we've seen.
It will be
my
huge.
20 years working as an ally, right?
Yeah.
So, it'll help. Like it will be significantly changing people's lives. And one of the things, even when we saw the incremental increases during the COVID, the $300, like it did make people's lives better. So if you're thinking about, the jump from 13 plus to 21 plus, like 21,000 or 2,100 a month, that will significantly help people.
It really made a huge difference, Karla, on that $300 when they did have that. The minister at the time, Minister Simpson, was the minister, and we were living in Langley. My roommate and I, we were living in Langley at the time, and had the media come out because we were really advocating strong on that. We were actually part of the 300 to Live campaign, and so we had the media come out, and they said, well, we'd love to do a story, both of you, and asked us a question and said, so you where do you live? You live at that building? I said, yes. Now, how is it? I go, it's great. It's a brand new building. We moved in there because we have the $300, and the ministry's office had said that, going forward, they're gonna keep it. This is the amount going forward, Brent, this is your entitlement amount. This is what you need to give to landlords. So I said, oh, okay. So they said, yeah, like once they put the $300 in, it's kind of like a pilot project right now during COVID. But going forward, this is the amount, and don't worry about it. Like, it's going to stay there. They're going to put that in the budget. So we had the media come out and say, well, what would happen if they took this away? How would that change your life? And Sonia said,
I don't like the direction this story is going, because I know you're no longer living in Langley.
Yeah, exactly. So the media asked Sonia a direct question: what would happen if we took this away from you right now? And she said we would have to move. And I said, yeah, we would have to move. And so unfortunately, we moved, and we looked around in Langley, and every corporate landlord around were saying that our income had to be around $4,500 a month minimum. They would go with minimum $4,500. They said ideally $6,000 would be ideal, but we'll go as low as 45. And I said, well, this is my entitlement. This is how much I get per month. And they said, oh, can you, maybe the ministry will top it up? They're not going to give me $2,000 a month. I mean, that would be nice, wouldn't it? And they're like, well, unfortunately, yeah, my boss won't rent to you guys. I mean, you guys seem awesome people. You pay your rent on time. But yeah. And so we got this echoing across a whole bunch of places. We took it to an MLA's office, and they're like, well, we've never heard of this before. And I'm thinking, well, wait a minute, how can you not heard about this before? Maybe they haven't, I don't know, but it just seemed kind of odd to me. So we were scrambling around, Karla, and we were still renting. And we said to our landlord, well, what if we find a place? What if we need to go and move? And like, we were still on a lease. Like, we were on our lease. We had to break our lease, and it cost us equal to what our rent was. Yeah. And that was a lot of money, but we were able to afford that because that's what we had, the $300. They took it away. So now we had to quickly say, okay, we cannot afford this now. What are we going to do? So we found a place in Victoria, a lot less in rent, but you get what you pay for. So we're still looking. We still like the Lower Mainland, and that's one of our on our bucket list that we want to get back there. The reason why also is not just because we're familiar with the Lower Mainland, and I like Victoria. Don't get me wrong; it's a very beautiful place. I encourage people who haven't been to Victoria, come to Victoria, check it out. And I'm not
a nice place to visit. Yeah.
You took the words out of my mouth.
Yeah. It's a nice place to visit. It's a really good, awesome place to visit. But to live here, for accessibility wise, for transit, it's very difficult for myself and for Sonia to get around on the transit. We take us almost an hour, but to get to Superstore from here. Or any other cheap stores. So long story short is, I find that the transit service in the Lower Mainland is more accessible for me, and for like walking distance to get to and from appointments, any other shops to go to the rec center. It was convenient. We could just go there and get some exercise in and better your health and your well-being. It was awesome. And when all that was taken away, it really took a toll on not just myself, but on my roommate, Sonia. And she talked to her doctor last night, and he said, it sounds like you need to be back in Langley, Sonia. And because he had called because she had to get a prescription made, and she had to wait a day and a half to get him to call because they were so overwhelmed of a shortage of doctors, right? But that's her family.
That's a whole other show, that one. We could talk about that.
Yeah. But, but getting to that, it's like he said, sounds like that's where you need to be. But it comes down to the affordability issue again, because he says, well, Sonia, it's expensive in Langley. It's expensive there now to live. And I randomly, Karla, looked at the rental prices last night. A place that we moved from, just get this, $1,995 now.
Wow.
And wow. Yeah, and we had a 2-bedroom at that same place. The place now, they want a 1-bedroom for $1,995. I thought, wow.
Yeah.
So I guess what the part I'm worried about is anybody PWD in BC, or actually any province, but in BC alone here, if they move out of a market rent because maybe the housing is not suitable for ourselves, I'm scared because if now the price is way up there. Like how are we going to reach for that and go, okay, should we stay where we are? Most people I talk to say, Brent, Sonia, stay where you are. Like, yeah, for now.
So one of the pieces of advocacy that I've like every election for the last several, and as well as every budget that we go into, I think we need to acknowledge, and I think we have, that there's insufficient social housing stock, right? Like there's not enough to meet the demand as per the wait list, and that the increased demand for rentals is driving the market up. While we're waiting for the Canadian Disability Benefit to be budgeted and money, I do think that it's a very fair ask to be asking for portable rental supplements attached to individuals to allow them to access
Amen.
housing,
Amen.
right? Like so.
Amen.
So it kind of goes back to the conversation we were having earlier. Is like there are some, if you're precariously housed or homeless, right? Like so, again, in order to access those services, that you would need to be homeless, and then that there's supplement programs. I think there's around 2,000 of them available. And then we were able to secure an additional 50 for people that are eligible for Community Living BC supports. But some research that we had done a few years back is there's at least 5,000 people looking for a home that are not appropriately housed. And then we went municipality, and we know that market rent has gone up 30% since the last census.
Wow.
And that if you look at persons with disability benefits and people who have roughly $500 a month to cover rent, and we have it by bachelor, we have it by 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom. And we know that the affordability gap is sitting, depending on where you live in, like it could be a little bit different in Victoria than it is in Langley, but it's sitting around $875 all the way up to $1,200 in some jurisdictions. So what we need is a portable rental supplement that allows people to access market housing while we're catching up on building social housing stock.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
I don't think they're going to fund something like that indefinitely, but at least they have to acknowledge the crisis that we're currently in. And for equity, ensure that people have a place to live.
Well, you make a great point, and that goes back to the whole point of when I said, Brent, we always talk about disabled versus disabled, because we have, the government does give subsidies or subsidized rents for some people, like in my situation, and like I don't know if you know, Karla, but in my situation, I've had my survivor's pension from my first wife clawed back for the last 10 years as unearned income, and you know I own my place here. Well, like back when we had money, we were able to buy. We bought it for like $129. But right now, my last property assessment, it's gone from $129. And this is again, I've lived here for 18 years, and it was 10 years old at the time when we moved in. So now we're talking a 28-year-old condo, 2-bedroom condo, 2-bath, 28 years old. It's now, again, we bought it for $129. It's now appraised for over $600,000. $600,000. So I have to pay the tax on that, right? And it's just crazy. And so, you know, I'm still trying to afford, a mortgage, right? And the provincial government does have subsidies for widows and widowers, but I don't count for whatever reason. I don't count. They say, well, we're not going to give you the subsidy. Well, we'll claw you back.
Is it about stacking benefits? There's another conversation I can have.
I don't know. I think it's because I'm not. I think it's because I'm not a renter. I think. I think they only give the subsidies to renters. So I think they figure if you have your house, you're
and they exempt you from
that. Have you applied for some exemption to policy? Like I'll try anything.
Well, I know. Like I mean, I've been fighting this thing for 10 years, and I just think
that seems so unfair. Like
I just think the whole thing is messed up. Right?
It's
because you still got to pay your taxes. So I mean, that rent amount could still go toward your taxes. Like they should be giving
your cost of living is still increased regardless of how you're living.
But I mean, that's what the whole thing of like disabled versus disabled, or disabled versus elderly, even, you know, like it's like you deserve this, but you don't deserve this.
There's a lot of exclusionary criteria built to systems, and And I think that needs to change too.
Here's
Is
another pitch, though, too, Karla. That when I had the minister from social development and poverty reduction on the show last year, yeah, I can't believe it's already 2024 now. I say last year, Sheila Malcolmson on. I had pitched an idea, and actually we had myself, Sonia, and Jeff Leggett. He's a fierce advocate also too, and Jeff, keep up the great work. Definitely, we pitched an idea in person, and when I had her on the show, I brought the same idea forward again.
Yeah.
And Sheila thought it was brilliant. And when I say brilliant idea, so here's the pitch is now, as you know, seniors have a the Savers
safer?
program,
Yeah.
and you got single mothers, single fathers. I mean, they should have all, even including Neil, should have that same program. But again, he doesn't have that same criteria to get it. Now it's called it's a rental assistance program. I call it RAP.
Yeah.
RAP. No, let's go RAP. But yes, now the idea to Sheila that I said people in BC housing, they have the rental assistance program, but it's rent geared to income. Now, people that are disabled that pay market rent in the private sector. I always call it the private sector because there's always private versus public. Now, it gets confusing because even under the public sector, they can still have private sector. And I learned that from an MLA who told me that. I went, what? He goes, oh yeah, like that's where it gets really confusing. But I said, let's just call an apple and an orange. Let's just keep it that way. So in the private sector, a majority of PWD in BC pay market rent, the majority of them. Now, the pitch I had said to Sheila Malcolmson was that why don't we extend the program, those programs that are there under BC Housing umbrella over to PWD in market housing. And so she goes, well, they get the 375. I go, well, and then I said, well, yeah, now it's going up to the 500. But now extend it over. So now everyone in BC private market housing paying the corporate landlords, but have that access to that same program. And now they can actually pay less rent. They can put that money back into the economy rather than paying it to the corporate landlord directly. She thought that was a brilliant idea.
Yeah, it is. I mean, that's
but
what they should do.
But here's the thing, though. Right now, how the programs are designed, Karla, is that it's based on a household income. It should be based on the individual, economy-wise, so that person has that power to make decisions for themselves, so that they're in an abusive relationship or they need to flee violence, whatever it may be. They leave. They can still have that wherever they go.
Yeah, travels. Yeah, I always call that portable. Like goes with the person versus.
Yeah, that's another thing, Karla. Do you get into the marriage equity conversation a lot in your with Inclusion BC? Do you
I'm kind of wondering.
Do you talk about that?
Yeah,
a lot?
I mean we've spoken into it many times. Obviously, there's it's discriminatory, right? Like so many people have had I probably shouldn't say it on a roommate, but they're like it's not a dignified approach to being a human being, right? That you need that you would be discriminated based on having a relationship or a family unit. So on an individual level, we just kind of stay in our lane and hear it as as people tell it to us, because we wouldn't never want to jeopardize someone's happiness because of their cohabitating romantically or not. None of our business. On a systemic level, of course, so when we tend not to dive into that as hard as we do some other issues, but we're certainly acutely aware of it and have strong feelings that it's discriminatory and that people should be supported individually, particularly the number of people that we work for and with that have intellectual and developmental disabilities that are in relationships, that's a bigger issue because people aren't supported to have romantic lives more generally by our systems, it does resonate a little bit different in the work that I do, Neil, but of course, we see it as discriminatory. It's just another reason why people don't don't explore love, like for
Yeah, I mean,
or
Yeah.
publicly explore like being a complete human being and being in relationship. We're actually releasing a film this month, or maybe it's next month, that kind of touches on all of that. So in
Oh,
terms of conversations with ministers, we always mention it as a kind of a underlying note of how there's additional levels of discrimination in our regimes, but we tend to focus more heavily on increasing the rates,
yeah,
yeah.
stacking benefits, on enhancing, not leaning so heavily always on SDPR, but other systems stepping up
yeah.
with more intentionality, like health and education and like Ministry of Children and Family. So yes, but I
Yeah.
wouldn't say like if you were to search inclusion BC
Yeah.
spousal benefit, we wouldn't probably be a top hit, but
Okay.
we're very aware of it. And
What do you
Yeah.
do you
Definitely.
remember back at the beginning of near the beginning of the pandemic, when the pandemic hit, there was Sophie Louis. Do you know Sophie Louis from Global BC? She's
yeah,
at the TV like a newscaster, Sophie Louis. And she was, I
I
think
remember.
she did a tweet or something, and she talked about how the racial hatred, because she's Asian, and she was
Mhm.
talking about how racial hatred had kind of gone like spiked up, because everybody's thinking, oh, this pandemic, came from China or whatever, right? I think that
Oh yeah,
that
yeah.
might
No,
that
I'm
Oh,
might
remembering it
that
now. I'm
might have
remembering.
been some of the narrative anyway. So anyway, she was saying that she had really noticed a big increase in this racial hatred thing since the pandemic, and she used the term othered. She says, "I feel othered," and
oh.
and I thought that was kind of a brilliant word, because
Mhm.
I mean that applies to
Absolutely.
disability
Yeah. Yeah.
100%. I
Mhm.
mean the BC government and other governments across Canada, that's what the current social systems do. They other us. Like,
Mhm.
we're not seen as a full person that deserves, like we said, that deserves a relationship.
An education, a job, a
Yeah,
house.
yeah.
Like there's
Like
it's
Yeah.
yeah.
like we're a less than, we're othered. We're kind of the discard pile, so to speak, right? Like
Yeah. Because I mean,
you're over
yeah.
here somewhere in this discard pile as an other, and the government is fine with that. And
Yeah.
and I
And
remember,
giving less and giving less because of that,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
so I remember when Sophie Louis actually said, use the word other, and I know she was saying that from a different lens,
Right.
from a lens
Yeah.
of racial.
She was being marginalized by race versus
Yeah,
disability, but
but
the
the fact that
concept
she
is the
said,
same.
I feel othered, like that to me, like something went off in my head as soon as she said that. It's like that
No,
that
I
is,
didn't.
to a
Yeah.
T, that is what disability is, you
I
know.
didn't hear the interview, but I definitely am aware with the concept, and definitely where I see that most pervasively is in our schools and our education systems, that children with
Yes.
disabilities almost don't deserve the same educational opportunities. As long as you're attached to a school and sharing air, we call that inclusive education. And not across the board. There's good teachers, there's bad teachers. Every system has,
Mhm.
has its pros and its cons, but there's a significantly where that othering begins. It comes back to where we started. It begins in our childcare centers, where you're excluded from having attending your childcare centers with your siblings. And then
Right.
it perpetuates into the education system, where you may be excluded from school or segregated in a different classroom or pulled out
Mhm.
here, there, probably not graduating with the same credentials. So that othering starts so early that we
Mhm.
create this phenomenon of acceptance, that it's okay to other people with disabilities because that's all you've ever experienced as a non-disabled person in your life growing up.
Yeah.
Unless you are an ally to people with disabilities, it
Yeah.
becomes
Mhm.
this kind of one place where it's still kind of pretty acceptable more broadly to discriminate and other. And then our governments just follow
They follow the lead on that.
They follow the trend, right? If their
Yeah.
voters aren't going to be offended by people with disabilities being othered, well, then we can continue to plan and produce and fund things the way we're doing. Which is why I think it's so important that the disability community and allies like myself, we come together as a voting bloc, and we're like, we're not okay with this anymore, right? Like, I'm not okay with people with disabilities being othered by our childcare systems, our school systems, our workforces, our housing providers, our medical professionals. Like, so, but you're absolutely right, Neil. It's just the reason, I think the reason why it hit so close to home, it finally gave like a definition to these like guttural feelings that are attacking people's identity and self-esteem, right? Like just being like, yeah, that's a horrible realization that that's how some people see me, right?
Yeah.
And as someone who walks alongside and journeys alongside people and their families, it's a horrible feeling to see the people that you care about and work but treated that way. Like it's just so wrong. It's so wrong.
Well, you know, when I was going to school, I wasn't fast at writing, so I had a kind of like a tutor coming in and teaching me how to touch type and put a hand book over my hands so I couldn't see what I was typing, and I had to memorize where the keys were, and like literally, and I usually was typing up to like 120 words a minute, and they said go as fast as you want,
which is great. I can't even hit like a 30.
Yeah. And so, you know, and I kept going over and over because I was having trouble reading the projector screens because it was too far away. The print was too tiny. And so I would get stuff blowing up. But and it was like the teachers felt that, oh, well, this would be the best for me. Well, rather than asking me what's good for me, and it was like way too big. So now I would be losing track on the paper, literally paper, of where I am reading this. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like, and again, well, we need to put you in another room, though, and teach you rather than in the class. And I said, no, I want to be in the class. No, it's better this way. And
for who?
for who? Yeah. And so when I, you know, as I was going through school and going through high school, and I kept saying the same thing, the same line, going, no, I don't want this. And so when I got through college, same thing. And I said, and you know, one of my instructors, Karla, said, Brent, it's not okay. It's not okay for them.
It wasn't okay then. It's not okay now.
Yeah. And I said, yeah, you're okay. But
I talk about
it's okay for you, the one doing it, not for the one receiving it. Yeah.
I talk about my journey of inclusion in my book, my Daddy
oh gosh, you're an author too.
Yeah, Daddy Bent Legs. If you look it up, Daddy Bent Legs.
Oh, okay.
That's my book, and I talk about because like I used to go like when I was like 6 and 7. When like GF Strong, I don't know if you remember, GF Strong used to have it's a rehab center, right? But it used to have a school in there, and so I went to school there as well, and then but I remember always coming home, you know, because like in my home life, like I have a normal sister that would treat me like a normal sister does, you know, and then we had like tons of kids in our neighborhood. Like I grew up in Burnaby, and there was tons of kids, and like you'd be playing like hide and seek or kick the can or something, and nobody paid any attention to my crutches at all, right? And so it was a really weird thing of going to GF Strong and being surrounded by wheelchairs and crutches and stuff, and everybody being constantly reminded of your disability and crutches and wheelchairs and things. And I said to my parents, you know, like, and this was when I was like 7 and 8. I said, like, this just feels weird to me. So I was actually one of the first kids from GF Strong to make the jump into the regular school system. And, you know, and it went well. But I remember, you know, that first year, especially when I first came to school, and I went from basically equivalent grade 2 to a grade 2 normal. And at first the teachers weren't sure like if I could handle it or not, and they weren't sure if I knew the answer. And so when they would call on me and actually I knew the answer, they like, wow, so I guess we can call on Neil and be fine then. But yeah, so you know,
you shouldn't have had to prove yourself, right?
Yeah, I know.
It should have been like Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
But anyway, you know what? We're almost at the top of the hour. And
Oh my goodness,
and-
you're right. That did go by so
yeah, I
fast.
told you. I told
It
you.
Oh my
always
gosh.
So
you know, and I mean, I think we'll have to do a part two and
Yeah.
kind of back on continue on.
We might need a bit more direction. Like, let's pick a topic. No,
yeah,
this was so fun. This was so fun. Thanks for like what a wonderful conversation with the both
a
of
good way
you.
to kick off
So
the
honored to be
the
your first
top
guest
the
of
year, too.
2024.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm totally honored to have you on. You know, this has been great. One thing, just kind of for us to wind down on the session here too is, I'm going to dive into next time I might have you on, but I'll give everybody a little sneak peek of it. Is I want to talk about ADHD and other conditions with people with disabilities have in the school system. Autism. I know a couple of people who had just recently moved from BC to Manitoba to Winnipeg, and I had them recently on my show, and they had to move because of environmental issues and also the cost of living, which now pushed them out of BC. So
Yeah.
they moved to Winnipeg, and I have a feeling they're going to be back because they had moved from there to here because of the weather. Winterpeg, right? I've never been there. My dad lived there, Karla, and I saw him when I was a kid, but I didn't go there in the winter. And I said, I want to come there in the winter. He says, no, Brent, you do
You
not. You do not want to go there. I said, yes, I do. He goes, no.
This
And I-
was
so I asked these friends that I know, and they said, trust me, you don't. Your dad's right. And I mean, God rest my dad's soul, but they said, trust me, you do not want to come here in the winter.
well,
But-
one of our members is the ADHD Society. If you're looking for future guest, Brent, I'm
Yeah.
sure they would be happy to come and speak about their experience.
Mhm.
Sure, if you can maybe forward it on
Absolutely.
Neil, forward them on to Neil.
Sure, that'd be
and,
great. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think more advocacy and awareness on all the inequalities on how people with disabilities are treated in the school system. As going through the school system, as we all have, I mean, as we all know, I mean, there are a lot of inequalities, and there's ways of redoing the whole system, recognizing that nobody should be left behind.
One of my dreams for 2024, hopes for 2024, since it's the 2024 show, is that the BC Human Rights Commission does an inquiry into the state of inclusive education.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we need to take a deep look at what we're actually doing there, and I'm really hoping that the commission will be an ally in that. So,
Mhm.
increase the PWD benefits and inquiry into inclusive education are my hopes for 2024.
Well, one good thing is I learned from the minister when we had her on previously last year is that something to look forward to is we have a state-of-the-art computer system coming forward in 2025, and it's going to be able to handle big giant payouts and everything else. So I guess we'll see what happens there. I don't know.
Yeah, it doesn't seem super relevant, but I guess there's
I don't know.
Maybe
That's
maybe an extra big payout for you and me, Brenton, or something.
I always
Yeah.
say the devil's in the detail
that
on that.
must be what they're talking about.
Yeah. Well, we'll find out if there's any more updates on
We
that.
sure will. We sure
When we
will.
have on, we'll next. Yeah, but
Well,
part
we're all-
two.
Thank you so much.
We're always looking for lived experience stories. So this being the first show of the year, we always put a call out for more lived experience stories. So anybody listening or anybody wanting to come on the show talking about their lived experience, we'd love to have you on. Yeah.
Yeah, we have this new segment. Last year we launched it, Karla, and it went really well. So this year, lived experience stories. We're going to have this as an ongoing segment
Wonderful.
all year. Lived experience stories, and so whatever topic is it about transportation, which I'm going to be diving in on Monday, by the way.
Mhm.
We talk about transportation. Is it about accessible? Is it accessibility? Whatever the topic is about accessible for you. Is it about housing accessibility? Is it about businesses? About education? Like you name it. Affordable housing. I mean, I don't know who doesn't touch on that one.
Yeah, all right.
Is it about
You know,
pink unicorns?
Yeah, right behind me. I wonder what that big unicorn is, Karla.
Yeah, no, I see that in your previous shows.
I always say that's just magic, hey? It's just poof. It's just, yeah.
I need one of those in my background,
There you
like
go.
or spice it up. So one of the things about the lived experience stories, do they invite their allies to come like co-present with them?
Yeah, we have a
Oh,
round.
that's wonderful. Oh,
Yeah,
that's
we have roundtables. Yeah.
Yeah.
wonderful.
It's wonderful, and I thought of this idea too, and I said, and with Neil, we kind of worked on that, and we said, yeah, we're going to have our certain dedicated people that are going to be on there always, and then they're going to chime in. So when I talk about transportation on Monday, they're going to give me feedback and saying, this is what I go through, and then from that point on, they may say, hey, you know what, I want to actually be on and actually talk about this. So everyone's
Fantastic. You guys just keep doing what you're doing. It's amazing.
Yeah, and that was the vision that I came forward with when I presented. I talked to Neil about way back in 20. It seems so long ago.
That does.
December 2021, and I said like I want to do something about lived experience and like how do I do this? I knew like I wanted to do something and bring people together, and it's just been a great success going forward, and it just keeps on the momentum keeps going ticking faster forward, and more people joining in and bringing what they go through on a day-to-day basis to the show. I think it's so important to talk about.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so I tell people like if you don't want to be on camera, like they can mute your picture, whatever it is. And
you didn't give me that option.
Well, we want to see your face though.
I'm kidding.
Yeah. And then, so I want to thank you so much, Karla.
The pleasure is mine. Thank you. I'm sure you could tell. I could talk about this thing for days, as I'm sure both of you can.
Me too. I just keep.
Well, you were worried that you couldn't speak for half an hour. You said
I know
that's too long.
You're right.
But here we are.
You are 100% right. That flew by.
Yeah.
It was, like I said, a wonderful way to wrap the first week of 2024. So
yeah, and
great gratitude to both of you.
Yeah, and you're the first guest on the second.
Lucky me. Lucky me.
Yeah. Yay. Thanks, Karla.
Okay. Send you both vibes. Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in.